It was rumored, it was leaked, it was officially not only acknowledged, but Microsoft owned it. I want to go to Seamus first. What did you think of that?
What did I think of that? Wow. So aside from flashbacks of terror at announcing specs, there's a lot of stuff to talk about here. There's a sales pitch based on performance, which we should talk about. You think about the games that you're most excited about. Like, I'm really excited about Cuphead. Not sure Cuphead needs Scorpio. So, what does that mean? And beyond generations, it's hard to understand what that means. I love all the messaging that did around developers. That's classic, like Xbox bread and butter. Give the developers what they want.
Yeah.
Make them free. They'll create awesome content because the content drives the business. At the same time, though, if I think about it like a developer, you have Scorpio coming out. You have this S version coming out, which has slightly different specs than Xbox One. You have Xbox One. When they say they're all compatible, of course, they don't mean that that Scorpio games are going to play on Xbox One. They mean Xbox One's games are going to play on Scorpio. Okay, and that's terrific for developers. But a game that's all tweaked out to be awesome looking on Scorpio, right, isn't going to play on Xbox One. So as a developer, you got to make a decision. As a publisher, you got to make a decision. Where am I going to put my money? Am I going to put my money on the broad, well-adopted platform? Or am I going to put my money toward leading on the other platform? And if I'm not, then am I going to make versions of the game that are compatible everywhere? And they're all going to have to be compatible on Windows. And it becomes a little bit more challenging.
I mean, that sort of wasn't the message that I got from it, honestly, with that final splash screen that had the S, and it had the Xbox One, and it had Project Scorpio, and sort of them saying we're not leaving anyone behind. Like, I do think, at least for the near future, into 2018, 2019, there's not going to be a game that comes out for Scorpio that won't be released for the other ones. That being said, a big fear of that is where you hit a point like we do with iPads now, or iPhones, where eventually your iPhone 4 will not run a game that comes out and is optimized for the iPhone 6.
No amount of awesome corporate messaging is going to make an iPhone 6 game play on an iPhone 4 well.
Yeah.
And despite the best efforts of some very high-paid marketing guys. So I mean, that's the challenge moving forward. Yeah. It sounds totally cool. Obviously, it's super exciting. It's really interesting for me from an engineering standpoint and a rendering technology standpoint to think about how it's going to work. It's interesting to think about cooling, how that's going to work, and all that fun stuff. But really, at the end of the day, I'm just imagining, if I'm going to make a game, and I have an awesome idea for a game, where is it going to live, and how am I going to approach that, and how many different platforms am I going to have to build for?
What I like to see out of this, I was impressed because I feel like this is the first time in a long time that this is Microsoft on the offensive, saying, here it is, we're throwing the gauntlet down, the ball's in your court, Sony. Whereas they've spent a lot of this generation really reacting, very reactive.
Okay, so you can beat me out. I shat all over it. So now let me say the cool stuff, right? This is really Microsoft flexing the muscle that only it has, right?
Yes.
This is Microsoft coming in heavy, right? Phil got to stand up there and say things about compatibility. Phil got to say things about generations. Phil got to say things implying support with cloud-based stuff, with deep learning stuff, all sorts of infrastructure that really only Microsoft can bring. Microsoft can bring the pain on all that stuff in a way that none of their competitors can. I think it's a really smart way for them to be pushing. Yeah, because there's nothing, like if I'm Sony, like I'm not bringing 40, 45 years of compatibility experience and infrastructure to bear on this one single point.
Right.
And that's pretty badass.
Yeah, and there was a bravado to that message.
There was.
That, and specs are all well and good, but honestly, at the end of the day, the consumer doesn't care about specs. The consumer doesn't care about those words.
Wait, people don't walk into Best Buy and say, sir, I require the most powerful entertainment console.
Yeah, I only date someone with a certain amount of teraflops. No, I mean, the thing is, people want to see results. People want to see what is a game going to look like.
And that's
Scorpio.
about all that infrastructure you bring to it, all the publisher relationships, all the back end, all the compatibility stuff, all the manufacturing ability, all the support, all of that at the same point.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to make a prediction here. I think it's going to be rebranded the Xbox, just Xbox. Little nod to my friend Seamus over here, and that's going to be the platform going forward. But we shall see. For now, Project Scorpio.